Hi, today I'm going to introduce you to Claude Code and show you how it can transform one of the most frustrating and time-consuming challenges in CPG analytics, data standardization. My name is Harrison Hensley, and as someone who regularly works with multiple data sources from platforms like 8451, Market 6, Circana, and more, I've experienced firsthand the frustration of dealing with incompatible date formats, especially in the Kroger ecosystem. By the end of this session, you'll understand what agentic AI is, how it's different from the chat-based AI that you're probably familiar with, and most importantly, you'll walk out with a live demonstration of Claude Code that can directly help you in your work the next day. Reports in CPG almost always require data from multiple data sources, and these data sources are all formatted a little bit differently. Take dates, for example, which is what we'll be talking about throughout this presentation. One data source could have P2 week 3, 2025. The next could have 2025 0120. The next 2025 P2 week 3 parentheses week 7. All of these are referring to the same week with different formatting. It doesn't help that Kroger uses their own calendar system with 13 periods in a fiscal year. The result is time intensive and repetitive mapping to standardize the files. It often takes me over 30 minutes of work cleaning the data and standardizing before I can even really start to build a report and dive into the data in a meaningful way. This leads to wanting to throw my computer in the trash almost every time I kick off a presentation deck or project of any kind using multiple data sources. A lot of people have probably used ChatGPT or Claude or some other chat-based LLM, and you might be wondering, why do I need a different tool? The difference is the execution loop. With chat-based AI or LLMs, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude in regular chatbot mode, here's what happens. First, the AI shows you the code that you asked it for. Then you copy and paste it. And then you run it in your environment. And then you encounter an error in which you copy the error back to the chatbot. The chatbot tells you a fix. You copy and paste that fix once again and repeat until you have the end result that you want. You're doing all the manual work and being the go-between person, middleman. With agentic AI like Claude Code, the loop closes automatically. Claude Code writes the code, executes it in your local environment, sees the results or errors, adjusts accordingly, and debugs based on what it did, and then delivers you a final output. It's a difference between being given instructions to build something versus having a skilled assistant who can actually pick up the tools and build it for you, learning and adapting as they go. That's what we mean by closing the execution loop. It's a game changer for productivity. And once you learn how to use it, you're not going to be copying and pasting code from a chatbot into your environment ever again. Let's use Star Wars as an example to explain the difference between agentic AI and chat-based AI. Think of chat-based AI as the Jedi Council. They are your strategic advisors if you're a Jedi. They explain the why behind things. They teach you techniques and methods, and they're incredibly valuable for learning and understanding concepts. I use regularly ChatGPT chat for strategic thinking, brainstorming, and learning new approaches all of the time. Claude Code, on the other hand, and agentic AI in general, is like the clone army. It's better when it has clear mission parameters, it executes tasks from start to finish, and it adapts to situations without constant supervision. You send it out to accomplish an objective, and then it comes back with the results. It worries about all of the hiccups in between. But the key insight: good Jedi and good analysts use both. Don't abandon chat-based AI or purely use agentic AI. They are both different tools to have in your toolkit, and using them in conjunction is how you unlock ultimate productivity. So, what exactly is Claude Code? At its core, it's a command line tool that executes code autonomously in your local environment. And here's what makes it powerful: it reads and interacts with your actual files, not hypothetical examples. It runs real analysis on your data and creates actual inputs that you can use immediately. Importantly, it iterates based on real results and not assumptions. If something doesn't work, it catches the error and adjusts accordingly. It's very well suited for data transformation tasks, automation workflows, and building custom tools. The workflow is simple. You provide the files and clear instructions. Claude Code does the work, and you get a usable output. One thing that I want to be clear about is that Claude Code works in your local environment. The data files stay on your machine. However, and this is so important, your prompts are sent to Anthropic's servers. We'll talk more about data security guidelines in a few minutes, but I just wanted to flag that up front because it's highly important. There are tons of use cases for agentic AI and Claude Code specifically in the CPG industry. The first is standardizing multi-source retailer data, which is what we'll go over in today's demo. But it can also be used to automate data quality audits, build custom tools that help with ROI calculations, post-promotion lifts, velocity reports. It can help with bulk report generation. Uh, Anything that you would need to use Python for, it allows you to quickly write Python scripts and other similar coding tasks. It helps with file format conversions at scale. But today, we're going to focus on that first point, the data standardization, specifically referring to different types of date formats within the Kroger data ecosystem. Before we jump into our specific demo, it's important to talk a little bit about the best ways to communicate with Claude Code. Like most other generative AI tools, the quality of inputs drastically impacts the quality of outputs. Good prompts lead to good results. Great prompts lead to great results, and bad prompts lead to bad results. So, for our date standardization, an example of a bad prompt would be make all of these files the same date format. An example of a good prompt would be standardize all Kroger week formats in sales underscore data.csv. Add a new column week standard in YYYY dash MM dash DD format. Use the Kroger underscore calendar underscore VLOOKUP.csv file for mapping. Keep all original columns. This works because it gives a clear objective. It gives specific output formatting, and it gives reference materials that it can use so that it's not making any assumptions. It's a very non-destructive approach, and it knows what it needs to do, what the output needs to look like, and it will iterate until it satisfies that output. The key thing to remember, if you remember one thing about prompting, is avoid vague requests. More specifics are better. Also, before we dive in, let's talk about the practical aspects of working with Claude Code. Claude Code works in your local directory structure. You navigate to the folder where your files are, and it operates there. It can read a wide variety of file formats: CSV, Excel, text files, JSON, etc. It's all fair game. And one pro tip, always provide reference materials when available. This has to do with the specificity aspect of the prompting. If you have lookup tables, example outputs, or documentation, include them in your prompt. Claude Code will use these to better understand your specific requirements. Your outputs are saved to whatever location you specify in your prompt. Another recommendation, and I cannot stress this enough, keep your original files backed up and test on copies first. You do not want to be the one explaining to your manager why you need to repull a ton of data from 8451 because you accidentally overwrote your source file. It takes 2 seconds to make a copy, and it can avoid a lot of work and embarrassment. Now let's look at the task at hand. For this example, we're going to take 4 files from 4 different sources: Circana, an internal database poll, Market6, and Stratum. All 4 of these format their dates completely differently. Circana doesn't recognize the Kroger calendar structure, whereas the other two do, but format it dramatically differently. Our goal is to merge them all 4 into one file with different tabs and a column with a standardized week template so that you can map seamlessly. Step 1 is setup. This is where you provide your files and your clear instructions, what we just covered in the prompting section. The next step, step 2, is execution. Claude Code writes a necessary Python code and runs it in your environment. You'll see it working in real time, and we'll call that out during the demonstration. Step 3 is iteration. This is where it really seems like something magical is happening. Claude Code reviews the results that it created, checks to see if it matched what the prompt asked for, and then adjusts accordingly until the results are in. It might run multiple iterations to get things right. Step 4 is delivery. You get back a clean output file and documentation of what was done. What makes this powerful is that Claude Code handles steps 2 through 4 autonomously. You're not copying and pasting code or anything. The most you're doing is saying yes to the occasional check in, or do we have access to a certain application? You're not going back and forth between a chatbot. The result is seamless automation. For our demo, we're going to provide a pretty specific prompt. Notice how it starts with context. All files are in a separate folder, and it calls out that specific folder. The files use various date formats, and there's a lookup table available. Then comes the task section, where we tell Claude Code to read all CSV files, read the reference table, and for each file, identify the date column, add a new standardized column, use the lookup table that we referenced, and keep the original data intact. Next, we give it some output information, where we specify exactly what the final deliverable should look like. A single Excel file with a descriptive tab name for each tab, and all original columns preserved with the addition of that new standardized week column. Last, there's a validation section requesting a summary report. This is just good to have for documentation. You can even include notes. For this prompt, I included a note that said that if a date format isn't in the reference file, make assumptions based on the logic, but to flag it, to doubly protect ourselves in case um, something doesn't match the reference file. And this level of specificity might seem excessive, but it pays off. And also, you write this once and Claude Code executes it correctly the first time. Back to the Jedi analogy, if you really want to optimize this process, I highly recommend using an LLM to help iterate and make sure that your prompt is as clear as can be. Now that we have a really strong prompt, let's look at the files that we're going to use. So we have 4 Excel files, each representing a different data source with different types of data. The Market6 file has general point of sale data, retail dollars and unit sales, stuff like that. The Circana file has weekly dollars for the entire market. Next, digital penetration and other e-commerce data comes from an internal database. And lastly, the 8451 Stratum file has household trips, which is a metric that you can only get from Stratum. We also have the Kroger calendar lookup file, which contains a mapping between all these different date formats. And this is something that we created with the help of ChatGPT. Again, illustrating how these tools can be used to amplify each other. Each file has its own structure, date format, and reason why it needs to be used for a given report or presentation, exactly as you'd receive them from these platforms in the real world. In a moment, I'm going to show you how Claude Code processes all of these together. But first, let's look at what the interface looks like when Claude Code is running. We're using VS Code to run Claude Code, but you can run it in other environments. VS Code was just the one that I'm more familiar with. It's fairly intuitive to use, but if you've never had any programming experience, it could be a little bit daunting. Once you give the prompt, it starts running code. And at certain points, it might ask you for permissions. If you're not comfortable, you can always throw the text into a LLM to have it explain what Claude Code is asking. Your options are you can say yes or no. Sometimes it says an option that's like yes and don't ask me again. This is typically what I do. Um, and the final option at the bottom, you can see tell Claude Code what to do instead. If it's doing something that requires a pivot or a shift of direction, you can type it in and it will steer the ship in the different direction accordingly. The last thing I want to show before we really get into the demo is what the final input looks like. In the folder that we used, we're going to see a new file that has the tabs that we requested and that new mapping column to the far right. We also will have the files for a new Python script that Claude Code generated, as well as the text file that documents everything as we requested in our prompt. So now let's get into the demo. So this is what the Claude Code interface looks like. And as you can see, we have our files just as they would be if you pulled them straight from the data sources. If we click into a few of them, we can see how the dates come in with the different formatting that we've looked at previously in this presentation. This is typically where you would be running a lot of VLOOKUPs or XLOOKUPs or index matches or HLOOKUPs. um, and then we also have that pre-made Kroger calendar mapping file that has examples of all the different formats. So we're going to close out of this and get ready to run Claude Code. So inside VS Code, there's a Claude Code button near the top right, but you can also use it in the terminal line if that's more comfortable for you. So I went ahead and I pre-populated the prompt. It's the exact one from the previous slide, and it starts running. It only takes a few seconds before it asks for its first permission. I'm going to click yes and don't ask again. And now we're going to speed it up a little bit. And it's asking for access to a few applications and a few more permissions. Um, but in general, it's a pretty hands-off process. And as you can see, files are already being created in the demo folder. So a few more permissions. This particular prompt, it recognized some errors and had to reiterate. So it turned out to be a pretty good example. And now we're done. You can see the text file with the documentation. Again, this is really good to have, especially in a corporate setting. And then the what we're looking for, the standardized file with the 4 tabs. And now you should be good to dig into the data and saved 30 plus minutes of work. Before we did the demo, I mentioned that Claude Code runs in your local environment and is manipulating your files, and also that the prompts are sent to Anthropic. But what does that mean? How should that impact how you use Claude Code? I'm going to go over a few best practices. And the first one is to use Claude Code on sanitized data or non-sensitive files. If you're working with client data that has real brand names, real customer information, or anything proprietary, sanitize it first. Best practice number two is check your company's policies on AI tool usage. Some organizations have specific guidelines about which tools are approved and which aren't. Don't assume that just because you have Claude access, that you have Claude code access. Verify. Best practice number three, never include personally identifiable information or client names in your prompts. You can say standardize the date column in salesdata.csv. You don't need to say standardize the date column in the Procter& and Gamble Q4 sales CSV file. Think of it this way. Your prompt is a set of instructions. Write the instructions that could apply to any similar data set, not instructions that reveal sensitive information. Of course, you can always work with your IT or legal team and see if the tools you have mean that you can handle data differently. But unless you know differently, operate under these base assumptions. Even though Claude Code is incredibly powerful, it's really important to remember that it's not perfect and that it's just a tool. You should always verify the output. And here's how you do it. Spot check your conversions, especially edge cases. Did it handle the fiscal year transitions correctly? Did it account for the odd 53 week that Kroger typically has some years? Did it map an unusual date format appropriately? Validate against known results. If you have a week where you know the answer, check that first. You always want to be spot checking. Does P1 week 1 2025 map to the correct date? Cross-reference a handful of conversions manually. You should also review the generated code when possible. This doesn't mean that you have to be a Python expert, but glancing at the logic can help you understand what approach Claude Code took. This is another thing that I have used LLM chatbots in the past for to help understand what exactly the script is doing. You should also check edge cases explicitly. The first year, the first week of the year, the last week of the year, any fiscal year boundaries, quarter boundaries, anything where date logic often fails. Think about it this way. You're the analyst, you're the one who signs off on the final product, and you're the one presenting it to clients or leadership. If it gives a complete hallucination or something wrong, nobody's going to be mad at Claude Code. They're going to be mad at you. AI is your tool to accelerate the work, but it's not your replacement. If Claude Code produces an output that you didn't verify and turns out to be wrong, that's on you and not the tool. Use Claude Code to save time on tedious parts, but not completely replace your expertise. Like anything, you need to find the right balance. It's important to understand that Claude Code's limitations exist so that you don't waste time trying to use it for things that it's not designed for. Because again, it's just like a tool, and you won't use the same tool for every task. Claude Code cannot access systems that require authentication. It can't log into your Market 6 or Stratum accounts, and it can't pull data directly. You need to download the files first. It also has limited capabilities with highly complex business logic unless you provide that clear example. If your calculation requires an understanding of nuanced CPG metrics that aren't standard, you'll either need to explain them or provide context or something to help it understand. It also works best with structured data. This means CSV files, Excel files, JSON, etc. Unstructured files like free text documents or images of tables are much harder for Claude Code to process, and it requires clear instructions. Vague prompts like analyze this data won't give you useful results. You need to be specific about what kind of analysis and what output you want it to be. So to recap safe use guidelines, you should use Claude Code for repetitive tasks and tool building and for learning. You should always, always, always validate your outputs when using Cloud Code or any kind of generative AI for that matter. And also, especially in a corporate environment or a collaborative environment, always document your processes. Some things that you should not do. You should never, unless explicitly permitted, share confidential data in prompts. You should never deploy it without testing. This is back to the validation. And you should never use it without understanding the output. And maybe most importantly, never, ever, ever bypass IT or legal policies. If something isn't clear, or if you're in doubt, ask your IT or your legal team, and they will point you into the right direction. You always want to be safe than sorry when it comes to these kind of emerging tools. So if you walk away from this presentation only remembering three things, these are the three most important things to remember. One, Claude Code executes and iterates, and it is very different from chat-based AI. Two, clear prompts and reference materials and additional context leads to better results. And three, always validate. You're the expert, AI is the accelerator. So what are the next steps? First, install Claude Code. You can use the link here, or you can just do a quick Google search. It's pretty easy to find. It only takes a few minutes to install, and then you're ready for step two, which is to practice. Use non-sensitive sample data and just play around with it. Stress test it, see how it kind of works before you really need to use it. And as far as resources, Anthropic's documentation on their website is an amazing resource. And also, always use your internal guidelines and resources. Last but not least, just play around and begin your agentic AI journey. It has personally changed the way that I work, and I hope that you find it as useful as I do. Thank you for listening.